Hello, Matthias.
Hello.
How
Welcome
are
back.
you? Oh, thank you.
Did you have a relaxing time off?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was very nice. Managed to visit family after a long work time. So,
Good.
what about you? Did you have any holiday during the summer?
I had 1 week, and then I have 2 weeks coming up now, in one in September and one in October.
Oh, nice. Planning anything nice?
Probably visiting my parents. Or yeah, that's probably that's what I'm intending to do. So they live in the south of Sweden. I live not north, but yeah, north out in Sweden, but it's not near north of Sweden.
I think. So Eric said he might be a bit late joining today. No one else answered in Slack. So I'm not sure. I mean, I missed the last meeting. So there were a lot of discussion, but I didn't really have an agenda for today.
Yeah, last time we basically just jumped into a bunch of different items and just discussed them. So if we get people, we could maybe walk down the list of discussions and see if we can get some started.
Okay.
I didn't check my Slack properly, so I saw the email had said he wouldn't be able to join also, and Alois wouldn't also be able to join.
Yeah, Eric said he was going to join, but maybe a few minutes late.
Mm.
I don't know, but it's already 6 past. We can wait a bit more for Eric if you want. We can discuss some of the items. Or we can just close it for today.
Yeah. I don't know. Do we have any ideas on how to get things going a little bit more, or how to get more engagement?
Well, I'd like to continue working on the existing POC. I get a bit of time. One thing that I've been planning to do, but I didn't manage to yet, is to kind of try and capture the issues or things that came up or came out of the building the POC. So what kind of problems or things that we noticed. And I think some of it is already captured in the discussion from last meeting, like the fact that we have a lot of data in the attribute that should be only used for filtering and routing, and other things like we had to do a lot of ad hoc things in the POC to carry the context from Captain. So it would be good to have some kind of general facility in the protocol for that, something that can be somehow specialized by the different applications, so they can carry their context in there. Yeah, so this kind of issues. So I just want to spend some time looking at the POC and capture them. Yeah, then there is the work to be done to kind of evolve a little bit the SDK. That was just it's an initial implementation, but there is some work to be done. So there are ideas of things that we can do moving forward, and but yeah, as you said, we need engagement. We need people to be able to spend time in implementing things, and so one thing that we plan for the next meeting is the naming discussion again for the next SIG meeting. We had a discussion with Emil. So if we manage to close that discussion in, let's say, a couple of weeks, so around the time, 2-3 weeks, then we can start creating things like GitHub organization and a new project associated with the SDK and the spec. And then we could try and so we could submit that project as a project to the CDF and try to get more involvement in that way.
Maybe it's easier to have something like a code project or something that people can commit to, rather than having people discussing. Because else, I mean, we have these meetings and there's not too many people that call into them. So, but maybe it's easier with asynchronous things then.
Yeah.
One thing with the routing there, when we had a chat there with Alois and so on, his idea of routing contained a lot more things than I thought about routing. So what do you think there about routing? Just curious. Hello, Eric.
Hello.
Hello.
Yep.
It looks like it's just the 3 of us today. Yeah, Mattia was just asking me about routing. Maybe could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So last time, I think you were there, Eric, also. We had a chat and Alois wanted to add things into the base of the event because he felt like certain things you needed for for routing was it like service version and other things that I wasn't aware of that you're concerned about routing. So that was why I was wondering if you had some ideas about what you felt was routing or not.
Right. At least in the scope of the POC so far, I think routing decisions were only taken based on the message type and the message source, possibly. So these are the two bits of information that were used for routing, and those are already existing cloud events fields, if you will. So really didn't have to use anything specific to the CD events protocol. It would be nice to try and implement some more use cases and see if there is any other type of information that could be used, that could be useful for routing. Yeah, possibly, I don't know. No, I'm not sure, to be honest. Things like that are specific to like IDs are normally not something that you want to use for routing, because they're you cannot set up filters for those because they are not predefined. So like resource ID, artifact ID, or this kind of things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, it gives your it sounds like you're more in line with what I have. Because when I was thinking, I was trying to have some kind of way how to frame this. But if you check, for example, if we want our specification to become a cloud events extension, you know, they have some extensions to them. And when taking a look at those extensions, they were quite small. It was basically just 1 or 2 fields.
Yes.
So if you want to make this an extension, then I probably would like to have maybe 1 or 2 extra fields in, but not more than that. Which would be that most of the stuff that we have would go into the data part. If that is a way for reasoning around it.
I think so. My impression so far is that, yeah, I've not yet found something specifically that could go into the as an extension. I mean, it could even be the case that we say we're just providing a kind of schema or data structure for the body. We don't have to have new fields in the headers, if you will. So I guess we could something that might be interesting there might be something related to the context. Well, no, maybe not, because I'm not sure you want to route messages based on context, because again, the context has unique kind of ephemeral type of information. So yeah, I'm not sure. I've not seen yet a field that's be implemented as an extension. I know that in the SDK today is everything is put into extensions, but I think that might be something that we need to change and just go more towards having this kind of information as data in the body, unless there is a clear need for having that information in the headers.
So I'm trying to remember the exact use case that Alois brought up, but I think it was something like, so say that we are deploying a service, or we send out we're deploying a service, and we have as part of that message like what environment, was it deployed on, what is the name of the service, and what is the version of the service. Then, like for instance, the environment that could be used for routing. If someone has a service and they want to say, I am the service that wants to react to services to other services deployed in this environment, then that would imply maybe not routing, but definitely filtering. And the same, you can go one step further and say, I am the thing in this environment that wants to know when this service has been upgraded. Then both those two will be used for filtering. So I think Alois said that probably you could come up with a use case for every single field inside the data thing for why it should be outside, because it can be used for routing and filtering. But of course, we have to draw a boundary or a line somewhere.
Yeah, I think it captures you. It captures quite good. I'm also trying to remember, I saw the notes here, everything generic, for instance, all service that should be on top level, and a specific to type of service or one instance could be in the data segment. But I guess that, I mean, I still feel that this is not really for routing, but it's more like for filtering. If you're interested in a service or something. So I don't see specifically why that would be on top level. But then, I mean, if it was, yeah, continue.
Sorry, I guess filtering and routing can be related, at least when using the when using the Knative event bus. Its routing is based on subscriptions. So you define a subscription that includes a destination and filters. So you can say send these messages to this destination if they match this filter. And yeah, so if you have an application that deals specifically with messages specific to certain environment, then I guess it could make sense to filter based on that. And so it could be considered routing because you say you don't want to get all the messages for all the applications to that environment. And in some cases you could say, okay, I can just filter on the destination. In other cases you could say, well, if those are different environment, maybe staging or production, you don't really want to get those mixed up. So you don't want to say in any event that is related to a production environment to a staging environment and the other way around. So in that sense, yeah, so environment sounds to me like potentially a good candidate as indeed.
But we're actually talking about some kind of like, I don't know if I use the word right. In NAFL, we have a domain concept. So for company Ericsson, we send basically millions of events per day. And in order to like separate those, we have an idea of a domain. So basically, everything within the domain you can filter on. But then we're using RabbitMQ to filter. But then if you want to have some separation, you create different domains, and then we let certain events be propagated to other domains if they're interesting, for example, like artifact new and so on. But all the activity events, for example, the job start pipeline in our case, those we don't propagate to other domains because that would be too much data. So is it something like this we're actually looking for, a way to like limit the amount of events to, yeah, in some way? I don't know if you understood me there.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm thinking. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I guess it's just limiting the events to those that are relevant. To a certain environment, a certain receiver, or listener, or client. Yeah.
Because there we are using now forgot the field that we're talking about, but this CD dot type in in AFO, we're using the routing key. In RabbitMQ, we have a routing key to know where it comes from. And there we include this routing key, a domain in the routing key. So basically we have, it was better described here on the notes for last time. Let me just drop that in the chat if you don't have it. That's the notes. I can probably copy that part also.
Yeah, I got the notes open.
Yeah.
Fine.
So it's this part with you have a family, you have type, we have a tag, and we have a domain ID. So therefore, in the IFO case, we can actually filter directly on the domain, or on family would be a bucket in the case.
Right. Just trying to figure out in my mind who would define the domains, and yeah. So
yeah, I mean, it's basically it's more like top down. It's a more top down approach, because it's just inside a company. So I don't know if you have a bunch of different open source projects, then the domain ID of having like pre-configured domains might be hard to come up with. But that is if we have some kind of, I guess you need some kind of hierarchy to know where you want to listen from. If you're just interested in a certain environment, then you want to listen on that environment, but then you need some kind of way to listen to it.
right. Yeah. So today we have the event type, and we have the source. In cloud events, there is a source, and so you could have the source structured in a way that it contains a domain ID information if you wanted to, but and sorry, just thinking out loud. Like with the Knative events router, you can only filter on exact matches. So you can say, yeah, event type equals exactly the string, or you can say source matches exactly the string. So if you have the domain information as part of the source, you wanted to filter for a specific domain, you would not be able to do it. So you basically need to filter on the list of specific sources from that domain that you want to listen to.
So Knative doesn't have wildcards then?
No, and I think it's for performance reason that they just allow you to do like an exact match, because it's, yes, again, it's meant for routing, and I guess the exact match, of course, is much quicker to compute. But yeah, I could try to find out if there is more reasoning behind this, if it's something they don't want to have, like regular expressions or partial matching, or if that's something that is not yet there. I'm not 100% sure.
It would be interesting. So RabbitMQ is the one I know, and there you have both. So when you put a routing key, you have dots in between, and then you can say, okay, within these dots, take whatever, and then you can also say star, that is, I only care about the first part of this, and then the rest of it can be a wildcard.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the cloud event spec now as well. There is an unrequired, what's optional field called subject, and the documentation for subject, at least according to my interpretation, basically says this is where you put whatever you need to put when source is not enough for people or for subscribers to filter messages. So if you have a subscriber that is only interested in a certain subset of messages of the same type or from the same source, you can put stuff in subject to deal with that. So if our spec could also include a design for what should be put in the subject field, that could also possibly be helpful. So for instance, we could say that if you do a service deploy, then the subject is the service that you're deploying, or maybe it is the environment and the service that you're deploying with some separator in it. I think that could possibly be used to solve some subset of the problems without introducing new attributes.
Yeah, that sounds like a very reasonable thing. Because I like the idea of having something that is there, and if we need to, then we can add on new attributes, but we can try to come up with something a subject. And there, for example, if you have a service or something that you're interested in, the subject can be a service colon something. And so yeah, that sounds like a good point.
So one exercise that we could do is to see for different messages that we defined until today, if there is any other information there, it would make sense to include as part of the subject. And where it is, then we could use then the SDK to implement that.
Yeah, that sounds good. So this solves could probably solve a routing question. But did you have some? You mentioned something else there, Andrea, or maybe I'm jumping ahead now in the subject. Please stop me if you had any more. But you talked about some additional things that you have to do ad hoc solutions for. Was it like captain content?
Yeah. So we for the captain context, we didn't have any standard or anything specified in the protocol that would specifically help carrying it around. So, I mean, because there's no specification for what we have in the body, we just placed it in the body, and then but the problem is that then the receivers that translated the messages or that processed the messages anyways did have to know the knowledge about where to look for that field. And instead, if we had a specific or common place where we say, okay, this is where application can store application-specific context, then that would make it possible for the even for the SDK to be able to return a generic context field, right? So we could have something like, say, okay, in the body we have a section that is dedicated to specific application, and there they must have a field which is called context, and the name of the section must be called with the same name of the application or the source. I mean, we would need to define some standard format so that the receiver don't need to make any special case for extracting the context from captain or from tecton or from whatever application that that is involved. The problem is,
continue.
No, the problem is it might be that maybe different application may need more than one field or more information to be carried around as part of the context. So I don't know if that's something that's we can cover with some kind of extensibility mechanism that returns a generic ticket of information or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, or maybe we have we always say that for an application you can have this dict. So the SDK returns kind of like the default. The protocol has some fields that it's defined, and then the application has its own part that is also returned. I'm starting thinking about, are you aware about is it called OC stack? Whereas you have like network, TCP, you have IP,
Yeah.
and you have application and so on.
Yeah.
I wonder if you want to create something like that for us. We have cloud events in the bottom, and those cloud events will then transfer it on something else. And then we have our protocol, and then we have like the next layer would be the application. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I think from logical point of view, that's the structure that we are creating. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Because then we would have an application part on top of the message.
I'm trying to take notes as well, I'm not so fast at typing.
That's good. So when it comes to this OC, like it's OC stack, is it?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Yes. OZ. I think it's OSI.
Yeah.
Yeah, OSI.
Yeah, that is. Do we need to draw some kind of picture in order to get people to be in par with what we're talking? Maybe.
But, yeah, for sure. That would be nice.
Should that go into kind of like the vocabulary draft then, if we want to go that direction?
Yeah, I think any graphic that can support the documentation that we produce there would be beneficial for sure. Yeah, so I think a visualization of a stack of protocols that we have in mind might be helpful. And yeah, so maybe it's good also for us to, as a framework, to think when we think about different fields, whether they need to be in a certain layer in the protocol stack or not.
Yeah. If I'm able to squeeze out some time, I could take a look at such a picture, but I have an upcoming AFIL summit, so I have to prepare for, so I don't know how much time I have with that now, but I'll put that in my to-do list at least.
Thank you. I put your name there in the notes. Okay. All right. Anything else you guys would like to discuss on these topics or any other topic? Any follow-up from last time?
You can just mention then that I'm not sure if this is for this group or for the SIG, and maybe you brought it up, but Alois also mentioned last time that we should try to attract people from other projects or companies that are working in this area. He mentioned like GitHub and Atlassian and AWS and some other stuff. Maybe you brought it up on the SIG. I didn't attend the last time, unfortunately. Not that we can do much about it now, but I just wanted to remind ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we are doing a bit of advocacy work and like presenting this POC that we built. So I think Mauricio presented it at the Captain user group. I'm planning to, they asked me in the CDF DOC to do kind of a presentation or update to where we at with this, with the work on this. So we'll present it there. And I also, we proposed a talk to, so actually have a talk accepted at DevOps World with Mauricio on this and KubeCon as well. So we are kind of doing a bit of advocacy work and kind of promoting the work that we have been doing so far and what we have, and hopefully that will attract some more attention. But we can definitely try and reach out.
Really good to hear.
Yeah, we can try and reach out to people from specific companies directly as well, for sure. I think it's good if we know about use cases that we can solve through events and we can include those in upcoming POCs. That's also very good to make a stronger case for the work that we are doing.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, other than that, I don't really have anything I would like to bring up this meeting.
So was there anything else you felt that you want to take a look on from experience from doing the POC, or did we cover most of the problems today?
Nothing that comes to mind right now, but I need, to be honest, to spend some time and yeah, look through the different bits of code that we wrote and see if there is anything else that comes up. But I think, yeah. So definitely the context one was the context one was a very important one, and routing as well. So, but I'll try to I'll check and see if there is anything else that we need to do as a follow-up.
Yep, that's good. Also, when you're looking at it, I created a set of unit tests for the SDK, and it feels, I tried to reduce the amount of duplication there, but it feels awfully lot of code for something that is kind of like a repetitive work. So it feels like if you generated one event, then you've generated all of them. I mean, we could probably just specify how the event looks like and then generate the code for that event based on some kind of template or something. And then we just need to test the template rather than actually testing that each single event can be produced. So if you have some good ideas there, then feel free to raise them.
Yeah, definitely. I think we could remove duplication, and yeah, code generation could be one way. Yeah, so I think this is one example, perfect example why it would be good to attract more people from that could contribute code here, because I think there's plenty of work that could be done to optimize the code and write more tests. And thanks for starting that. Yeah, and SDKs in multiple languages. So there is for sure a lot of work that could be done. I think the SDK even only covers a few of the events today, mostly those that we needed for the POC. So is there an open PR with the unit test that needs to be looked at, Matthias?
Yeah, I have it up for review. I think I have yeah, add unit test and 92.
Thanks for that. So I will check it out.
And then you can also maybe take a look at 84 also, I think. There are some inconsistencies in README there. And then I noticed yesterday, I just could mention it, that in the README, we don't have examples of all the things that the SDK can support. We only have I think it's only a couple of them. So the examples for how to send events with the command line is this doesn't cover everything. If you won't have everything there, I don't know.
Yeah, probably. I wonder if that's part of what could be generated as well. If it's some kind of spec for the structure of the events.
Yeah, I think it would be better if you can just, this is how an event would look like, and then we generate those parts. Because else I think there's going to be an awful lot of code for it. I think you get the feeling, a little bit of a feeling, if you take a look at the when I'm testing the event types, it feels pretty repetitive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I can say that I've got the bandwidth to go and solve this issue though right now, but it's good to track them. And maybe you want to create an issue in the SIG events to track this kind of things. So we can mark them as help wanted. And
yeah, maybe I could do that. I can create 2 issues actually. One to cover more documentation on what it can do, and one about reducing code duplication in SDK. So we have them tracked at least.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right. So missing dots and code duplication. Okay. Anything else, folks?
No, not from my side now.
I'm happy to.
All right. Then good talking to you today. Thanks for joining in. And yeah, until next time.
Yeah, have a great one. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.